Who the fuck is that guy?
Welcome in, everybody. Joe Quills here with you on this Tuesday night. Had to think there for a second. Well, that's what happens when you're in your little sabbatical from your real career or trying to create a new career or anything like that, whatever you want to call it. But either way, um, just trying to get rid of because you know how you highlight something on the thing? That's what happened. But anyways, hope everybody's doing well out there on this Tuesday night. Got a lot to talk about here tonight, and I think I think we're going to talk about keyboard warriors tonight. Apparently, some keyboard warriors got after a Cincinnati Bengals player last year, and he spoke up about it today. We'll get into that. A couple of players passed. A couple of NBA players. One, I think he was a prison player. I tried to look up his stats, but his stats only had him as playing 2 games this year, so I don't know if he played or not. So, but either way, we had 2 passings today in the NBA world. We'll get into that because unfortunately, any life loss is a sad thing. So, and apparently, starring in a hit TV show on Apple gets you a career in the USL, which is a soccer league here in America. I'll tell you about that as well. And I also got my eyes on 2 TVs right now. It's not as good as 2 chicks at the same time.
2 chicks at the same time, man.
But Phillies are up 2-1, bottom of the ninth, up in Boston. Oh, I forgot to wear my shirt tonight. Oh, wait a second. I gotta do a BRB here. 1 second. All right. I knew I forgot to wear something tonight, but you know, had to. Um, so I had to wear that tonight because Phillies are playing the Red Sox, and I'm just doing something here. So, and I've worn this from time to time as well. So, but the thing is, I got this outside Yankee Stadium. Um, God, it has to be at least 10 years ago. My buddy Steve, who I used to work with, he goes, "Oh, let's go to the Yankees game." And as long as it's day off, I don't give a shit. I mean, he's a Yankees fan, but he's also a Phillies fan, you know. Um, but you know, it's you know, I mean, if you say, hey, let's do it, yeah, let's do it. Um, so I go there. Um, I did my thing. I was looking around there because, it's like, oh, we got time to kill before the game. And I think we even stopped at a diner near the stadium or something like that. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So went in there. I was like, hey, I want this shirt. So, I had to buy it. But I was, not only am I using this for, um, not only was I using this for the Red Sox, I'm also using it for everything Boston. So Patriots, even though technically they're not in Boston, but they're Boston's team because they're like however many miles it is, because we did mention it on when we were talking about World Cup and transit fares and stuff like that. So, we did have that. We do have, um, you know, we do have um, we do have the Bruins and we do have the Celtics. And I told Mike after the show, oh shit, I gotta wash this shirt because I wore this for Game 7 Sixers Celtics, but I didn't have it ready to go. I was like, oh, I gotta wash it, but I did wash it last week. Um, so I did have this ready to go, and of course, as soon as I put it on, Boston started to get a rally here in the bottom of the ninth. So hopefully, I didn't jinx the team, but either way, even if we do, even if the Phillies do lose this game, we can all agree, at least most of us can agree, that Boston sucks cack. So, uh, so I thought it's one thing I forgot to do tonight. So we'll talk about all that and more. And we do have breaking news. Now, I'm not sure if this is coming from South Philly or from Camden. I imagine Camden because that's where their offices are. But breaking news, Daryl Morey is out as president of basketball operations for the Philadelphia 76ers. And, the one thing I will say, Heads had the role because I did a little research tonight. Now, I may be off a game or two here, so if somebody did come up with a stat like this and mention it on TV, I missed it. Because a lot of times when I'm showing the game, when I'm streaming and the game's on, I'm doing both at the same time. A lot of times they'll say something, but because I got the TV on, I don't have the ability to hear what they're saying a lot of times. Like, for example, right now I got San Antonio, Minnesota on. San Antonio's up 59-47. Wembanyama had 16 points in the first quarter. He said, all right, you want to give me a flagrant 2? Well, here's a flagrant 3 and stuff like that. So, but I did a little research because it seemed like the Sixers were losing a lot of games by 40 points. So I brought the number down a little bit. I brought it to 25. And the Sixers lost 10 times. 10. And if I missed something, it may be 11. And the Phillies win. So Phillies win 2-1, and it's 900 career wins for Don Mattingly. But seriously, Sixers lost 10 games this year. And since I was counting them up real fast, I may have missed one. It may be that they lost 11. We definitely know it was a lot more than. So just let you guys know. So, in my opinion, losing 10 games by 25 or more points, I don't care if it's 10 games in the regular season. I don't care if you win the championship, okay? I don't care if you win the championship and those I don't care if you win the championship and you're 10 losses because you can afford 12 losses in the playoffs because you have a maximum of 28 games. I don't care if you win the championship, you win 16 games and 10 of those 12 losses are 25 points or more. I'm sorry. You have to examine that. And, there's been injuries and stuff like that. But in some regards, I think what you have to realize is maybe you need to do some changes here. And, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not the most knowledgeable NBA guy. And a lot of my friends that I've been talking to online have been saying, yeah, we really haven't watched much NBA this year. And it's hard to watch sometimes because it's either one of three things. It's either a three-pointer, it's a dunk, or it's a free throw. So I will say this. I just think when you lose about a ninth of your games by 25 points or more, there's something seriously wrong with your team. Now, granted, we have guys missing games because of load management. But the Sixers had a lot of injuries as well. But 10 by 25 points or more is a bit excessive. And even worse, 4 of those 10 were in a 3-week period that the Sixers were in the playoffs. They lost game 1 to the Celtics, 123-91. They lost at home, 128-96. That was game 4. Game 1 in New York, 137-98. Now, that one I could kind of give an excuse to because you're on the high of finally beating Boston in the first round. And then all of a sudden, you crash down to earth with that. Even though it's lumped in with these 10 losses, I still will say that these losses are unacceptable. The number of them. 10 of them is way too much. And every team is going to have them. Even if it's just one. Every team is going to have them. We're not going to lie. But I think, I don't even know what's the excessive amount, 5. And when 3 of them are games that really matter, 2 of them at home, 1 of them an elimination game, yeah, you do have to reevaluate. So the Sixers are going back to the drawing board. And one thing I said before, when I first saw this came out tonight, Sham Charania was the person I requoted on X. I said, all right, Morey gone, Nurse next. but it appears that Nick Nurse will remain with the Sixers. Um, but according to Sham Charania, Daryl Morey's out. Morey had a meeting with David Blitzer and Josh Harris earlier tonight in Philly, and the decision was made to part ways. So I think now this may have been in Camden because, this may have been just a generalization that they're in Philadelphia, because Camden is right over the river from Philly. And, if you're coming up 95 from the stadiums towards Northeast Philly or up Delaware Avenue, I'm sorry, Columbus Boulevard, I couldn't care, whatever the name is. I mean, technically it should be Delaware Avenue because there was a law back in the day that road had to be named Delaware Avenue, but, whatever. But laws can be changed. So Nick Nurse will continue next year. Now, Bob Myers, who's the president of Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment, will lead the search for a new head executive for the 76ers and oversee the franchise basketball department in the interim. Myers is a four-time championship architect of the Golden State Warriors. The incumbent staff will be evaluated by Myers and then the incoming top basketball official. So if I'm reading that right, welcome in. Hope you're doing well out there. Dinoways. Lewis is also here. Sorry about the Sixers. Thought that keeping Paul George was a plan, but it was the opposite. Joel Embiid wasn't the future. Lots of false prophets in Philly, from Ben Simmons to Markelle Fultz. True. I think the one thing is with the Sixers is they laid the groundwork for tanking in the NBA. Well, let me rephrase that for those that are watching. They laid the groundwork for tanking as we know it now, because the Sixers overtly said when Sam Hinkie came here, "Oh, we're not going to be winning for a couple of years. We're going to stockpile those draft picks." And the thing is, if you're going to stockpile draft picks, one, you're going to have to hit a lottery, which they did a couple of times, but not year after year like they were. But also, you have to realize that you have to draft the right players as well. Now, they took chances on Joel Embiid, and I'm not going to say that it was a total disappointment. Everybody gets hurt, some just more than others, and Embiid falls into the more than others category. But Markelle Fultz, Ben Simmons, some of those. Jahlil Okafor. You can go right down the list of all players that went in there, and at this point, Allen Iverson should come back, but realistically, they need to clean house for as many first-round picks as possible, and so should the Bulls. Tanking is the way it came true for OKC. Yeah. And the one thing I will say is, when it comes to the process, OKC perfected it. They got lucky because I think SGA was a trade, if I'm not mistaken. So you did have all this, they made the right moves. They got the right guys that fit together, and they did win games. So I'm not going to, say that the Sixers, I will say the Sixers did fail in this whole process thing, but they did lay the groundwork for processing in the NBA. I mean, the team that owns their arena, the Flyers, they're going through a process right now as well. They made the playoffs for the first time in 6 years. And, you saw the Sixers, they ended up losing really in a real ugly fashion where you just say, what the hell was that? When it's like we had a little bit of hope that maybe the Knicks are beatable this year, but they're playing incredible defense and everything else. Whereas the Flyers, now granted, I said ahead of time, I didn't think the Flyers would beat the Pittsburgh Penguins, but the Penguins are an old team. But you had a guy in Rick Tocchet who has been on both sides of that rivalry. He knows what it's like to be in Philly. He knows what it's like to be in Pittsburgh. And you had guys that could win. But I will say this, I'll pull up your comment in a second. The Flyers, even though they got beat and got swept by the best team in the East by far, the Flyers actually gave Carolina fits in all of game 2, most of game 3, and all of game 4. And it also helps that you have Rod Brindamore to prove that, hey, the future's bright here in Philly, because I saw a video. I'm not going to play it because knowing me, I'll get a copyright strike. And he basically said, enjoy this. You're definitely on the way up. So, but Adam Silver's anti-tanking efforts only favor the teams that have what they need now and will widen disparity in the league. Teams not equipped should still prioritize picks, not winning. Yeah, but I'm the type of person where I'd like to see teams trying even towards the end of the year. I think that the one thing that the NBA needs to do that they will never do, they need to. I mean, they kind of got away from it, but I have to look at all the stuff with the new lottery that's going to come in play, I think, next year. The NBA needs to get away from a total merit system, as I call it, where, hey, if you're the worst, I mean, they're kind of getting away from it little by little, but it's still a merit system where the worst teams get rewarded. I would love to see. Now, I would like to see what the NHL did when they missed an entire season, and that was the year that Sidney Crosby mysteriously ended up with Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh was about to move to Kansas City or Portland. Oh, let's save hockey in Pittsburgh. The only time I question a draft lottery in the NHL, where I question everything NBA, I will say you need to get away from this merit system. And I think what you need to do is you throw every team into this lottery mix. And I think it's like 245, 250 ways that you do this. Or 245, 250 outcomes. What I would do is you don't base it on the fact that teams with the worst record get the best chance. What I would do is, now if you want to do it over 3 years, that's fine. I set up this model over 5 years. And what you do is you base it on recency in not making the playoffs. and you punish the teams that win titles. Like, for example, the Washington Wizards, I think they missed the playoffs each of the last 5 years. So let's use them as the guinea pig here. If they didn't make the playoffs each of the last 5 years, they would have 5 balls for not making this year's playoffs, 4 for last year, 3 for the year before, 2 and 1. So that would be 5, 9, 12, 14, 15. And what I would do is every team in the league gets 1 ball. They get a John Kruk. Besides, John Kruk's in Boston. So, had the Phillies game on. And, so every team has a ball. Now, the other thing I would do is any team that wins a championship in that 5-year period, they get a ball taken away from them. Now, I think Oklahoma City has been in the playoffs the last 5 years, and if they haven't been in the playoffs one of those last 5 years, then what I would do is, let's say OKC has 1 ball from that 5th season that we have in this sample of balls to pick the winner of the lottery. What I would do is every time you win, that a ball gets removed. Now, I could be talked into, well, if you win 2 titles, we remove 1 ball for 1 title, and then we remove 2 balls for a second title. And, let's say you win 5 in a row, you're not getting any anyway. But everybody would have a ball. But if you win a championship, you get punished even further, and you get 1 less chance. So, sound idea. Devils turn pretty okay. Drafting Jack Hughes and trying to do a cheap deal shows me at least awards are found in draft. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, that's what the draft is for. It's to build teams back up. It's just that some teams are good at drafting and some are bad. And, Sixers got lucky this year with VJ with VJ. Jesus Christ. Why can't I think of his name? VJ. Jesus Christ. Edgecombe. So they got very lucky with that draft pick. And when you saw him that opening night, it was like, holy shit. How did he drop to the Sixers? But, it also was a lottery pick that they got to keep. So, but, I mean, I just think that you lose 10 games by 25 points or more. And like I said, if it's 11, if it's 9, give me benefit of the doubt here because I wrote it down real quick before the show started. So I just don't think that you can be a franchise that wants to try to win titles and get and lose that many games. And like I said, I don't care if it's regular season, postseason, or a mix of both. Losing 10 times by that many points is a fireable offense. Now, Nick Nurse just plays the players that he plays with the hand he's dealt with. So, but I can't give him I can't give either of them benefit of the doubt. But it looks like they're keeping. It looks like they're going to be keeping Nick Nurse. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Bob Myers just said, because he was the architect for the Golden State Warriors, I wouldn't be surprised if he said, well, can I put myself in that position? But it doesn't look like he wants to. So the Sixers had 5 berths in 6 years, playoff berths, 270 and 212. But the Sixers still have not been able to get past the second round of the playoffs under Morey. They haven't been to the conference finals since 2001. We know all about the James Harden thing. He was traded here, and then Harden didn't want to play here anymore. He wanted to be traded everywhere. Um, but um, I think, but it's hard to say whether you keep Nick Nurse or not. But it may be a situation that whoever comes in, it's like, well, what are you going to do with Nick Nurse? You're going to keep him? I'm going to let him go. All right, get out. That's probably what's going to happen. But I just think that it is somebody had to pay the price for it. Now, another thing I would say uh, to Lewis on YouTube, another thing that I say, and I've said it numerous times on the show over the last year or two, and I blame Out of the Park Baseball. I kind of blame Baseball Dreamland for this, but I will get to that thought in a second. I read that Paul George hasn't started his penalty yet for PEDs. Hurts plan for Sixers plan to include him in a trade package. Paul George did serve the 25 games. And he's very lucky he plays in the NBA and not Major League Baseball, because in baseball you get a set amount of games and then you miss the playoffs as well. That's why the Phillies lost Alvarado for the season, for the playoffs, because it was 81 games and also the playoffs. But I'd have to check into that. But unless there was something more to just the 25 games that is in the collective bargaining agreement or an addendum to the agreement for the performance enhancing drug policy. So, but he did sit out the 25 games. So unless there may be something that you're mentioning that hasn't been done. But that's definitely something I would have to look at later on. But yeah, so, and that's the thing, I'm going to admit even though I have these moments, mostly offline, that I'm right, you're wrong, deal with it. This is actually with me doing this show, because this show is, when I was working for who I was working for, and the stress was high, burnout, anxiety, all that shit. Okay. Yeah. But the thing is, I don't know. I mean, I'm a person that likes to look at like basics of collective bargaining agreements because of my job, because I was a union steward for my union before I left my job. Like, I'll talk a lot about collective bargaining, and probably Thursday night, probably get into some of the Major League Baseball starting today, their collective bargaining stuff. So, but the one thing is, in order to grow what I'm doing here, I'm not going to do what a lot of these sports radio stations do, whether it's in Philadelphia with WIP and 97.5 The Fanatic, or FAN in New York, or whatever is in your area. I'm never, the thing is, I'm going to admit, I don't know everything. But since this is also a one-man operation, I will make notes of things from time to time, and I'll take a look at it, even if I never get around to it on my next show on Thursday night. Even if I don't get to it, I'm okay with admitting I'm wrong, and you know, I don't have a problem with you saying what you said there, because I don't know everything with collective bargaining, but I know enough about it that I know basics. And I know how, like, I can tell you what we dealt with behind the scenes at my old job. Even though I never sat in on a actual bargaining deliberations, I can give you an idea of what's going on. But the thing is, with what you mentioned here, I have no problem with you saying that, because there may have been, because there may be some ancillary thing in the PED agreement, or if it's part of the collective bargaining agreement, there may be something in there that I don't realize. So, but I know he did serve the time, but maybe there was something else in there, and that I do appreciate you mentioning that. You know, but I'm trying to be cool with that. So, but um, but yeah, so 10 games, losing by 25. Um, so sounds important. I never worked for a union directly. Sound cool. Yeah. The one thing is, with a lot of things that I will do, like for example, this next story, I will. Well, the football story I want to talk about tonight. We'll get into that. So we'll get into that in a little bit. I'm not afraid of using personal experience with a lot of things. Like, for example, we were talking about Trevor Bauer last night. And the one thing is, when you're an athlete, it's hard to blend into society. Now, we all know everything that happened. We're not going to get into did he do it, did he not do it, whatever. All I will say is something happened. And the whole thing, the whole gist of the story last night was um, two people, two women were trying to blackmail him or whatever. So whatever happened, happened. But I'm always of the belief, don't put yourself in that position. And I use it to describe a situation that we had at my job, where two people in another state were wearing a shirt that looked like it had the company's logo on it, which, with the whole Charlottesville riot thing, was a major business code of conduct violation, which they said, hey, we find out who you are, you could be fired. But they never did it. They never could find out who the people were or anything like that, so they didn't fire anybody. Um, but yeah, so like business code of conduct, and also, if you're wearing your company's attire, and somebody, and you end up punching somebody. Oh, you can, call up HR for that company and say, hey, or call the boss or whatever and say, hey, guy from your company wearing your shirt punched me in the face and assaulted me. But also, even the guy with the Eagles who told the guy at the Eagles game a couple of years ago, he told a woman who was a Packers fan, because her husband was a Packers fan from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, I think it was. He was saying, "Oh, I'll see you next Tuesday." Put two and two together with that, but he ended up. Everybody started searching the guy. They found out where he was. They found his name. They found his LinkedIn. They contacted the company, and he got fired because he was doing something that was the exact opposite of what his company's modus operandi is. So, but yeah, I try to bring in some experience as well, because a lot of people will take up the stance of, oh, I'm not going to I'm not going to um, um, words are hard, people. Got to make fun of myself. You know, you got to realize that, you got to be held accountable for your actions. And even if it's unfair that you're being filmed without your consent, you just have to realize that we're in a society now where even you can just do that and start taking videos and pictures and whatnot. So, but I do appreciate that, Lewis, and hopefully, um, hopefully you're enjoying the show here. And unfortunately, um, even though we did have the Phillies defeat Boston, because we know Boston Sox cack, and I told Mike I was going to wear it. It was just that I was like, oh man, I think I got to wash it. But I did wash it last week. So, uh, and we had that little delay at the start of the show because I forgot about it. But little serious note here. Um, Grizzlies forward Brandon Clark passed away today at the age of 29. Um, I saw that earlier today. I'm like, what? Because you don't expect a 29-year-old to pass away, especially. And I've heard some things of what they thought it was, but this article I don't think mentions it. So I'm not going to say he died potentially this. I'm just going to avoid what was said by some sites and on the internet, whatever. I'm going to play careful here. Um, so he was actually, you know what? We're going to mention it because ESPN does mention it on here. LAPD, the LAPD sources confirmed to ABC News that Clark was found dead from a possible drug overdose Monday in a home in Los Angeles' San Fernando Valley. Narcotics were found on the scene, and there's no evidence of foul play. Grizzlies said in a statement, part of their statement was, "We're heartbroken for the tragic loss." Also, he was an outstanding teammate and an even better person whose impact on the organization, greater Memphis community, will not be forgotten. So, and it does appear that he did have some issues in the past, but I'll just say one thing. It's just, without turning this into things like that, but if they didn't mention that in the article here, I wouldn't have said that it was potentially drug related. But 29 is way too young, and the one thing I will say is, no matter what the issue is that you're having, help is only asking one person away. For lack, I'm sure you can clean that up and use better words there, but you know, and the one thing is with me, and I admit it because I'm so goddamn stubborn, that a lot of times I don't ask for help. Now, there are times where I have no choice, but like for example, these life issues that come up, there's always help out there. If it's not the first person, go to the second person. If it's not the second person, go to the third person. You know, even if it is the 96th person on your list, um, you know, it may be that 96th person that's the one that helps you. And like for example, like I found my discharge notes from when I had a panic attack back in 2018, 2019, something like that. I could look it up because there's a funny story that goes beyond this. And the one thing I said was, the one thing, I was going on a trip, and I was having these panic issues for a while. It wasn't just a one day thing. It was just something that was building up time after time after, it was just building up for probably weeks. And I thought, well, if I get on that plane and I go where I'm going, maybe things will subside a little bit. But things just got worse and worse when I was at the airport. And I joked around on social media. I joked around to my friends. I said, well, my baggage made the trip, but I didn't. But, um, and, and the nurse that was in the ER, because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I have a little bit of a chest pain here, but it's not, it's not major, but, it's like, well, let's get all this checked out. And thankfully, there was a doctor that said, anxiety, depression, take pill, go home, you'll be fine. Which that was the case, but I found those notes and it reminded me when I was cleaning out one of the drawers. I realized that the nurse said to me, "Well, why didn't you go to one of those hospitals that you could have stopped at, because you passed about 10 of them between the airport and getting back home before you came up to this hospital?" I said, well, let's say this wasn't anxiety or anything else, which it was. Let's say it was something other than anxiety. I wanted to be at a hospital that was close to where my dad was living, because I figured if if there was something wrong beyond just a panic attack that was just building for weeks, I wanted to be somewhere. I'm even in my worst times, I'm still thinking about others. I'm thinking about how, because I know my dad will want to be there, but it's like, well, you're down in University City at this hospital. I'm way up here in the Northeast. I can't get down there. So that's why I ended up at a hospital near me and got the right doctor that was um, making sure that they know what the issue is, discharge me, not make me sit there for 6, 8, 10 hours. It was like in and out in like 2 hours tops. And like an hour later, I was crashed on the couch because of the Xanax or whatever it was. But the one thing I will say is, whoever, if you ever have any issues, feel free to ask. And if it's not the first person, it may be the second person, it may be the third. And there's always helpline, general helplines that you can call as well. So, there's always something out there for you. Also, I saw this later this afternoon. I'm like, because you know how they say things come in threes? Well, they did come in threes. A former Eagle passed away later on after this story broke, but um, I'm looking for something else here and I can't find it. But Jason Collins passed away today, and the reason why this got breaking news status on ESPN on my app, and probably other apps as well, but I only remembered ESPN popping up because I was dozing off. He was the first openly gay player in the NBA. He was a global ambassador for the sport for the last decade. He died of brain cancer at 47. Once again, way too young. He was diagnosed. he told ESPN in November he was diagnosed with stage 4 glioblastoma, one of the deadliest forms of brain cancer. He had traveled to Singapore this past winter to receive experimental treatments not yet authorized in the United States. The treatments were effective enough to have him return home, attend All-Star Weekend events in LA, and attend a game at his alma mater, Stanford. But the cancer returned recently, and he died peacefully in his home. But um, so his family released a statement through the NBA. We're heartbroken to share that Jason Collins, our beloved husband, son, brother, and uncle, had died after a valiant fight with glioblastoma. He played 13 years. Now, he had announced he was gay in 2013 in a Sports Illustrated cover story, becoming the first publicly gay athlete to play in any of the 4 major North American sports leagues. Collins told ESPN in November, when I chose to come out, there was no scandal or anything. This was like, I feel like I'm good enough to play in the NBA. And by the way, I'm gay, just so everyone knows. Cards are on the table. That's who I am. And hopefully we get to the point, and and the way things are in the United States, I think we do have those regressions. I think we're in a regression right now of like acceptance versus you're evil, you're a sinner, all the shit that they tell you. But I hope we get to the point and somebody will go, I'm gay, and you're like, yeah, and because I think we were starting to get to a point a little bit where, but there's always somebody who will bring the old days back where, I mean, I don't have to tell you, but you have the people showing their hate because they're not them. And, the one thing I will always say is I couldn't give a rat's ass what you do. I have respect that you're doing what you're doing. Respect me for who I am. I'll be respecting you for who you are. And that's the way it should be. Not, ooh, he's this, she's that. Who cares? Because, like, for example, I said this with all different kinds of things. I couldn't give a rat's ass if you're a minority or, you have, you're female or, the one thing I will say is whatever, whatever you are or how you believe and all that, I couldn't care less. Now, if you use it against me, I mean, like, for example, in my job, I had a grievance because I got removed from my clerical position, but they but I was working overnights because I was at the bottom of the list in my office, despite being there as many years as I had because they had stopped hiring. I said, hey, I'm working overnights. Can you present my grievance? And this guy who helped other people because of certain minority things was more than happy to help him, but because of me, he didn't want to help me. And I mentioned it to the union president after the fact. I said, I probably would still be the clerk, but this person didn't want to present the grievance. He told me to do it myself, and he didn't give me any, I mean, even if he said, talk to whomever, I mean, it also didn't help that the person was like, well, don't go to Joe. Come to me. No, stay to your office. I'll work on my office. No, we didn't do that. So, um, but yeah, so but if you use something against me and reverse everything on me, then whatever. But I mean, in generalities, it seems like I'm contradicting what I'm saying. But when you're helping somebody who's a complete opposite of me because they're similar to a lot of the things that you do, then if you're helping somebody else and they're very similar and I'm not, but the thing is, that's definitely something I could say to somebody off camera, off stream, but I don't want to say it on here because it's like, oh, Joe doesn't like this group of people or this group of people or this group of people. Well, I'll also tell you this. Also, I know that if I made my accusations right away, they say, hey, Joe, that's bullshit. Just shut up. Do your job. Or let's say I went to court and I claimed discrimination, or I went to the head of the union, they would have said, accusation of this, and that. Get the fuck out of here. Denied. You know, things like that, because, and that's something I can talk about off camera, which I won't do there, but you have to be careful of what you say, no matter what side of the fence you're on. And that's what I'm going to tell you people. Always be careful what you say. And also, that person did burn their bridge with me. And that's the main thing with that one person that did discriminate against me. Never burn that bridge because you never know when that person's going to come back around. I mean, I could be a manager for these three people and I get riffed. I get laid off for whatever reason. And I go to a new job, or maybe let's say two or three jobs down the line. Next thing you know, that person who you led is now leading you. That's why you never burn bridges, because if you have a good professional relationship with somebody, you will always, I always feel like you may get benefit of the doubt, and they'll know what to expect from you, know how you work, know how you tick, know your professional side, all that stuff. But if you're a real ass and whatever, it's like, no, we're not going to hire you, or we're going to make things tough for you. We're going to make it tougher than what we do for a normal person if we do hire you. So, but the one thing I would say is, keep things on the up and up. But when it comes to Jason Collins, I hope after, hopefully in 2028, 2029, we get to the point where oh, you're gay, you're this, you're that, who cares? And I mean that in a good way, because what you believe in, who you're going to bed with, all that stuff, I couldn't give a rat's ass what you do. Because would you really care if I'm banging an ugly chick or a hot chick or whatever? No. I couldn't care what you do in your free time. And hopefully we get to the point where even though we had, maybe something we can do for Jason Collins is, in a way, in a good way, that when somebody says, "Oh, I'm gay," in sports, you would say, "Yeah, and," because just because they can bounce a basketball or throw a baseball or throw or catch a football or shoot a hockey puck, what they do on their time shouldn't matter. But we can go into that, but I'm going to cut away from that because, I could be getting myself into trouble with some things there. And I know if some people are watching, they're going to say, you didn't have to talk about that. But, I'm trying to keep things as general as possible. And also, like I said to Lewis earlier, I can bring some life experience into this where, maybe I can help you guys out with some things as well, because it's like, hey, Joe said this, and this. Maybe I should try that. Or, collective bargaining. So, but before I get to my football story, I do want to let you guys know this weekend is the Preakness. We have a full field of 14 going. And because we don't have a Triple Crown on the line, we aren't hitting the Preakness as hard during the week. But we are going to hit it hard on Saturday morning, as we will be looking at the Preakness from Laurel Park. And we may look at another race. We may look at the first race. We're going to be heavy on the Preakness, and we may just do an hour where we're just talking about one race. So that'll be Saturday morning on these same channels at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. Q&A Racing, yours truly. And AJ is supposed to be on the show on Saturday. I say supposed to be because another thing I will tell you guys is, things happen. So, if something were to happen and you can't make it, I'm not going to hold it against you. Even if you ghost me, I wouldn't hold it against you, because I know, some people may oversleep, or I may even oversleep. But we'll be live Saturday at 10 a.m. We're going to be looking at the Preakness from Laurel Park, and a unique race this year. It's a one and done there at Laurel Park before they go back to Pimlico next year. So just to let you guys know about that upcoming show on Saturday. That's at 10 a.m. Eastern. And I have to work on the commands in here because I do have socials. I have my socials there. But other than that, I do have to work on a lot of the little things here and there that I got to work on here. So, but yeah, so I have to work on being more active on TikTok as well. So now I wanted to bring this up here because once again, the keyboard warriors are affecting people, and not in a good way. And I'm sure there are people that could mess with me as well. But the good news is, at least with, especially being on Twitch, and by the way, why aren't you following me or subscribing? Twitch.tv/JoeQuills. That's where you need to go, because I am going to be gaming soon. And the gaming that I'll be doing will be, as I'm playing, being as social as possible. So it won't be like, totally talking about the game. I'll be doing play-by-play of the game and stuff like that. But, I'll also be like, well, what did you think about this last night? And I'd be like, huh? I would pull something up real quick, and next thing you know, it's like, oh, shit, something like that. But, like one stream I watch in the morning. Oh yeah, I did want to say, I blame Baseball Dreamland. I don't even know what I was saying, but I do apologize for that statement because it was like, what are you? Because I got sidetracked and whatever. But so I take back what I was starting to say there. But like for example, sometimes games are set up in such a way that some games you can go on tangent upon tangent upon tangent while you're playing. I could be watching this chat while I'm playing and, have a fun conversation. Like one show that I watch, Sean Curtis 4:30 in the morning yesterday, all of a sudden we started talking about Gus, the second most famous groundhog in Pennsylvania. I mean, he's out in the Pittsburgh area, so that's why I did that. But you know, and I tried to tell Gus that there is an ointment, so he doesn't always have to keep on scratching. But, uh, but, but the thing is, at least on Twitch, and you can do it on the other platforms as well. It's just that with YouTube, I'm not sure how you do it exactly, but at least on Twitch, I know how to do it, and there's people that can do it for me as well if they're watching. So you can very easily you can very easily get something that really will bug you. And especially in sports where in the case of the Cincinnati Bengal, you're dropping passes left and right and you're being told about it by your fan base. And some of the things that were said in generalities, I'll mention in a second, I think being in sports, you're kicking yourself because you hung that curveball and they hit it 500 feet into Ashburn Alley or whatever, or I fell down and that person hit a 3 on me to win the game, or Dan Vladar, I should have caught that puck but it slipped out of my glove and went in and Carolina won the series, or James Bradbury pulled the one Kansas City Chiefs uniform and it was a hold and that cost the Eagles the Super Bowl. Some things, whether it's little things like middle of the season, beginning of the season, or even the final minutes of the championship game, it's going to weigh on your mind. But in some cases, you don't need to do what Andre Iacevich, I don't know how it's pronounced. I think I'm butchering the name. So if I am butchering the name, so be it. I apologize. So he opened up about some extreme online abuse he suffered last season. He said, I felt like last year I was in my head a little bit. I had those drops in those games and people were telling me to kill myself and all that kind of stuff. I never had that kind of stuff happen to me before. All right, I'm going to say this. Knock it the fuck off. Because, you think you're such a keyboard warrior and you can blame this on social media. You can blame this on sportsbook gambling. You can blame it on this. You can blame it on that. The fact that somebody, that this is a thing. But also, I'm going to say this as well. And it may be that some of the settings needed to be changed and, you get the first one, but also the thing is, even though like, for example, X or Twitter, that's turned into a joke under Elon Musk, but And also, Facebook has turned into a joke because, like for example, they'll get me for posting the picture that I have of a baby holding a Playboy while he's sitting on a porta potty because I'm exploiting children or whatever they say. I say, well, it's a joke. And also, and if I could comment further on, I'll say, hey, listen, that picture's from 15 years. That post is from 15 years ago. If you want to come at me for something, come at me for something that I posted last week, not from 15 years ago, because your algorithm flags something. But the one thing I'm going to say is, now granted, you probably need to change some of his social media as well so that people couldn't get into his DMs as easily. Or maybe he's the type of guy that he may only be on social media with, hey, great win, thank you, Bengals Nation or whatever, or who that name, whatever they call themselves in Cincinnati. Thank you for supporting us, whatever he does. But the thing is, even if, it probably does get a little harder. I said harder.
Look, he's got a boner.
No, I don't. Hey, gotta have fun in a serious, even in a serious topic like this. I will say that sometimes, I mean, probably less with X because they went extremely to the right with a lot of their stuff, with Elon Musk sucking the dick of Donald Trump and all that. It's almost like it's a free for all in there at times, but I think that, and also they fired all these people when Elon took over because we're going to make money off this. So you out. So I think the one thing is, if you went as far as going to the point where you went to law enforcement about it, you can trace that shit. Every time you log into a website, your IP address is coming up. It'll say where you are within whatever. But then again, you do have VPNs. So VPNs, you end up with a dummy IP code, And sometimes I have to remember to turn them off. So if I pull up a sports book page on my thing, it's like, oh, you're not in Pennsylvania. Yes, I am. And then I look, I'm like, ah, shit. But the thing is, you can be tracked for saying this profane and stuff and telling somebody to do what some of these people did say. These keyboard warriors, as we'll call them. And, in some regards, you just lose it and you just say what you have to say. But, and the thing is, I never had that stuff happen to me before. Okay. I mean, was he a little naive as well? Probably. But you're in the NFL. You're in a sport that's highly wagered on. So I don't know if it's just because it's Bengals fans giving him shit. I don't know if it was. For example, if it was people that were betting on him to get 3 catches or more. The single game parlay props or just the props in general. That could be the case too. But whatever you're doing, there are always consequences for your stuff, for whatever you do. There's always consequences for action. That's what you have to realize. You know, and also, not only does it affect an athlete on the field, it's going to affect them off the field in their personal life too. So he said, so it got in my head a little bit when people, when your DMs, which are known as direct messages because that's what they said here in the article, but we all know that. They're flooded with people telling you to kill yourself. If, now probably I'm the asshole that if somebody said that to me in DM and I actually see that come in and they tell me to do that, I'd probably say, no, you do that to yourself. And who's going to be one that gets banned from Facebook, X, Instagram, wherever, or wherever you're going? Who will be the one that gets banned? Me, because I was the second one to say it, not the first. But the first person will be like, oh, I didn't say anything. Well, if you let me show you the screenshot before you ban me, you'll see that this person is just as culpable as I am. But I said it out of anger. He said it because he's a degenerate or whatever. So there's always something a little bit that there's always something that will, there's always somebody who thinks they're, some people think it's funny. Some people are angry because, they didn't cash their 16 leg single game parlay because he dropped the ball. Now, here's the thing. A couple of years ago, now granted, this is just me sitting here as I was beginning lunch because now I didn't bet on the race, but it was the end of the month. And to be a professional handicapper, you need to win 20% of your wagers, 20% of your picks. Now, that number may have changed over the last few years, but and my numbers haven't been that great so far this year. So I sat there and I watched the race. Now, the jockey had my horse along the rail, the horse I selected in the article. And by the way, you can go to Q&A Racing. You can read my articles. Also, there's a race coming up later in a little bit. I'm going to possibly watch that race with you guys and go from there. Let me see where they're at here. But we still got a good half an hour yet. Okay. So pineapple. I think that was the code word. If not, I'll get rid of that in a minute. But seriously, I will say this. Some people people take this differently. And me, I'd be like, no, fuck you. You do that to yourself. Because I'm that type of a person where I will, if you said that to me, and thank you for doing that, by the way. So think pineapple was the code, but you know, whatever. But so he was smiling as he does often during sessions with reporters at the locker, Iacivas, or wherever you pronounce it. I do apologize, and you know, I hope he doesn't take it personally or anybody else. But as he continued to discuss this subject, its demeanor shifted to a point that the 26-year-old became emotional. And he said it made him, he said, it makes me angry, honestly, before eventually stepping away for a few moments. So something like that will affect you. And you're already under a lot of stress because if you are dropping footballs in games, you know, you're dropping all these passes, you know, that's your meal ticket, especially him. So, you know, but whether it's just because they're a Cincinnati Bengals fan or they're betting on the game or a combination of both or whatever, or they're just thinking they're fucking funny. No, just stop that shit. There's no reason to do it. And also, if they really wanted to, they can trace you and lock you up, or at least charge you with something. But now he had 10 touchdowns on just 51 receptions in his first 2 seasons. So he was very productive despite having a limited targeted share. His production dipped last year with Joe Burrow injured. He went from 6 receiving TDs to 2 in 24 to 2 this past season, despite having 3 fewer receptions than previous season. But he also had 5 drops. So, but, you know, the thing is, nothing will prepare you for seeing out of clear blue somebody saying something like that, whether it's for everyone to see on everybody's timelines that follow you or whatever, or even in a DM, because guess what? Everything gets logged on the internet. And, you know, you could even say it person to person, but then you get into he said, she said. But, you know, if you have somebody that witnesses it, then, you know, you don't have a leg to stand on. But a lot of, you know, it's just so many people think that, oh, I'm going to say what I need to say and that's it and blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? That's how you get yourself into trouble. That's how you lose jobs. That's how all this shit, you know, you are going to get caught. Just because you don't like that somebody dropped the football or whatever, or he only got 9 yards instead of 10. Now, for example, when James Bradbury held whatever Kansas City Chief it was in Super Bowl 57, when he held him, could I have found him on the internet? Or maybe I just said, you know, for example, oh, this person needs to do this, this, and this. I could have did it. But the thing is, we're watching the game here that night. And I said to Mike, I said to a couple other friends, I said, game over. You know, well, first of all, you know, even though I'm diehard Philadelphia sports fan, I'm also the type where I can be, even though I'm a diehard sports fan, I can look at it at a neutral perspective. I don't Even though I could just be like, oh, Philly this, Philly that, if it's a fair call that leads to my team losing, then yeah, I have no problem with it. And you know, I did say, hey, that's a penalty. The game's over. So but I'm not going. But my mentality isn't, oh, that mother effer. I hope he does this. I hope he does that. And anything bad that comes out of my mouth. But when I was talking about that race at the end of April a couple years ago, I had a chance to go 30% for the month in win wagers, win selections. The rail was dead. I mean, it was more dead than OJ. I just couldn't think of a good example here, but all right, we'll use Pete Rose for example because Pete Rose, not a good human being. I was on lunch, but never did I direct it to the person directly. And I'm just pissing and moaning like I always do about certain things. And I said, essentially, I basically said, you know what? I'm venting that MFer wrote that dead rail and he knows it's a dead rail. And he got put in there. He couldn't do anything, blah, 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 blah. But the thing is, I'm not on Twitter looking for the jockey's name, hoping he has a Twitter account and say, hey, MFer, you cost me 30% winners this month. Because truthfully, nobody gives a shit what I do with, 30%. Oh, wow. But it's no reason to, I just think that sometimes you just need to realize, oh shit, did I really mess things up? And trust me, you will be messing things up doing stupid shit like that. So if you're ever gonna post something like that or say something about that or send a message to somebody about that, think about it before you do it. Now, I admit even I'm guilty of spouting off before I'm thinking. So just think about it before you do something stupid that's going to get you into trouble. That's the whole moral to the story, not just in basically most of our stories tonight, but that's just the way things are, the way things fell today. So but so we do have one final story here, and it's a bit of sorbet here. Now I don't know if anybody has watched Ted Lasso in the past. I know I haven't, but it's not that it's just I just don't watch too much TV or movies or anything anymore. I'm listening to podcasts. That's about it while I'm doing the stuff that I do. Um, but one of the stars, and it may be loosely defining the word star. I don't know because of the fact that I haven't seen Ted Lasso, even though I should be, because I hear it's a great show. Ted Lasso star Cristo Fernandez has become a professional football player. Football as in soccer. Signing with the USL Championship side El Paso Locomotive, the club announced today. And I know some people are going to be saying, oh, this is going to be an epic disaster. This is going to be like Garth Brooks or Russell Wilson in spring training for whatever, or Will Ferrell doing that spring training stunt he did a few years back. You know what I mean? So, this could be you may think this may be a stunt, but it really may not be. So he portrayed fictional footballer Danny Rojas on the small screen. He will now lace up his cleats for a real-life team after a 2-month trial with El Paso. Now, let me just see one thing, because I want to get a gauge on his age. He's 35 years old. Okay, so I'm guessing this is my last chance. Let me do what I have to do here. So I think that's what we're seeing here as a truck goes by. So I think this is, it's like, let me do this. If I don't do this, I'm going to regret it. But I think El Paso may know that, hey, this kid did play soccer in the past. So this isn't just him being signed because he was on Ted Lasso. So he's going to be playing a forward position, just like his character did in the TV show Ted Lasso. So Locomotive coach Junior Gonzalez said, Cristo is a great addition to our roster, adding another attacking threat. His passion for the game and leadership qualifies for our locker room, allows us to continue growing the positive culture we strive for our club. Okay. But there's more to it. No, I apologize for yawning. I'm looking something up here real quick. Fernandez said, football has always been a huge part of my life and identity, no matter where life has taken me. The dream of competing professionally never truly left my heart. Ding, 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 ding. He's had a pro football career. Football, a.k.a. soccer. He said, I'm incredibly grateful for El Paso Locomotive FC, the club, coaches, staff, and especially my teammates for opening doors and giving me an opportunity to compete from day one. Now, when he was younger, he played at the youth level with Mexican side Tecos FC, but walked away at 15 because of an injury. So this sounds like it's still a opportunity. It's like, well, you were in Ted Lasso. What if? And they probably did their homework, or he even actually said was with the team or doing promotions with the team, whatever. And next thing you know, it's like, hey, you're pretty good. What if, because sometimes, like for example, if we want to compare football with soccer, like for example, Jordan Mailata, who's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame. He played rugby or Australian rules football, one or the other. And he didn't know a damn thing about the sport. I mean, at least Fernandez knew about soccer. He actually played soccer, but, I mean, we might be comparing apples and oranges here, but, he's got an opportunity to do something here. So I would say it may be a publicity stunt. We may see more to this. We may see a lot of things here, but, if he can play a little bit, and, we may not be privy to some information here, like, oh, he's been playing on the side and whatever, he's been doing this and that, maybe. That may be the case. I just get the feeling there's more to this than just the fact that you have somebody playing soccer. Now, granted, I'm sure you need mad skills just to play or whatever, but you're going to do what you have to do. And by the way, it's a final in San Antonio, 126-97. That game was close for a little bit. I think it was tied in the third quarter briefly, but San Antonio said, no, you don't. So Spurs are up 3-2 in the series. So, the one thing I will say here is I hope he succeeds. And if he doesn't succeed, at least he tried. But even with going with the other story that you have here, the other stories that we have here, just because he's a star, he's an actor, or he was at least an actor in Ted Lasso. He now gets an opportunity to prove that even though his background did help him for that TV show, apparently, you don't necessarily have all this stuff here. So I basically say, now granted, USL is second level for the most part in this country, because you do have MLS, you have USL, and USL is going to have promotion relegation. And I think eventually over time, I think MLS is going to get into promotion relegation, but USL and MLS are two different soccer leagues, and they're kind of like how well, actually, you don't really have an example in the United States, or probably the best way, even though Live Golf may be done after this year, you do have the PGA Tour, you have the Live Tour, and they are kind of competing against each other. But yeah, but MLS has the TV contracts, they have to deal with Apple and all that, and but once again, Saturday morning 10 a.m. also eligible. AJ should be with me. We will be looking at the races from Laurel Park, part of the Q&A Sports Zone. I wanted to hide myself there for a second because I wanted to show that logo that I'm hiding there. But we'll be looking at the races on Saturday. We'll be looking at the big race, the Preakness, on Saturday. And hopefully we can give you guys a winner, because with a 14-horse field, and also with a 14-horse field and the favorite's 9-2, and there's no obvious favorite to begin with, there's an opportunity to make some big money, a rare opportunity where you can argue that you can make a truckload of money on the race. Whereas most years it's like, oh, how am I going to beat this Kentucky Derby winner? Or how am I going to beat journalism last year? Even though Sovereignty said, the connections for Sovereignty said, nah, we're not going to run in the Preakness because we have to run in the Belmont, and 2 weeks after, and blah blah blah, and this, that, and the other thing. But the whole Triple Crown thing's a topic for another day. So, but I do appreciate everybody watching here tonight. I appreciate Lewis for chiming in on the YouTube side. I appreciate everybody watching on all the different platforms that I stream to, and I'll be live on Thursday night at 9:00 with whatever comes up. Maybe I'll wash this shirt and wear it again on Thursday because, Phillies did win tonight over the Boston Red Sox 2-1. And I have a race to watch. My race goes off at 6 minutes. It is the final race of the night at Assiniboia Downs. Got a field of 6 going here in this race because you do have a scratch there. And yeah, I promote FanDuel Racing. I'm showing you Twin Spires. Oh well. So you have a field of You have a field of 7 entered. 6 are running. I gotta shrink this some. You did have a scratch here of Complete Overhaul, which was a horse that I thought was an outside chance here because he was coming in from Oak Lawn. But Classico was the morning line favorite, and that was based off of the fact that he's coming in from Santa Anita, new trainer. There was a new owner, but the trainer didn't change until they went up to Canada. Muddy Mike is favored here at 4-5 here. I just thought that this had the best shot, and also the fact that he's 3 for 4 lifetime. But you can catch that on FanDuel Racing. You can find the race on the Assiniboia Downs YouTube page as well, because that's what I'm going to do, because I want to watch the race by myself. And if these odds get a little bit better, I might put a $10 wager on that horse. So my money is on Muddy Mike here in the finale at Assiniboia Downs. And we'll get tomorrow's article ready to go tonight. I'll post it in the morning. It's going to be Horseshoe Indy. Thursday's going to be Churchill. And then Friday and Saturday, Laurel Park, because I'll have the Black Eyed Susan and the Pimlico Special on Friday and a few other races. And then they'll have the Preakness on Saturday. So, but I do appreciate each and every one of you. So let's do it again Thursday night. Follow me at twitch.tv/Joe Quills, because that's where all the cool kids should be. Because what I eventually want to do is I want to do it kind of like the Pat McAfee show, where, if you're not on Twitch, bye-bye, that sort of thing. But that's it for now, and I do appreciate everybody. So that's it for now, and I hope everybody has a great night out there.